Good evening again, gentlemen. You are welcome to yet another session in our study of Greek exegesis. Today we will be looking at the lexical syntactical analysis of a passage. This comprises of two levels of analysis: the lexical analysis, which deals with single words, as well as the syntactical analysis, which deals with the relationship between words. Now, we must remember that the Bible has come to us in the words of men and subject to the rules of grammar of the words of men. So, for us to get the optimum out of the passage of the Bible, we need to examine closely its use of words and syntax. This is Olivia Ayowale, your facilitator for your course, Greek Exegesis. Welcome to class. Yeah, welcome once again, gentlemen, and we are in the class Lexical Syntactical Analysis. Our intended learning outcome is that by the end of this unit, you should be able to define what lexical and syntactical analysis are. You should be able to identify the steps that are involved in lexical syntactical analysis. You should also be able to discuss the methods which the interpreter can use to determine the meaning of a word. And you should be able to identify tools and resources that can assist you in the process of lexical syntactical analysis. Now let's begin with the definition. The basic thing we need to understand is that the message of the Bible has come to us in the language of humanity. And this language is made up of words which are used closely together. So, lexical syntactical analysis is the study of the meaning of individual words, that is the lexicology, and the way those words are combined, that is the syntax, in order to determine more accurately the author's intended meaning. Now, Government 2001 defines it as the quest to understand words, idioms, grammatical forms, and the relationships among these items according to the norm of usage as at the time the text was produced. Now, the phrase as at the time the text was produced is very important because language is dynamic. And the way some words of the Bible are used today, we cannot see the words that they are used today and compare it or take it to mean what they mean when they were used in the Bible time. Now, lexical analysis first identifies how an author has used his word. Has he used it literally? Has he used it figuratively? Has he used it symbolically? And then he interprets the word accordingly. This analysis notes that words have various meanings, and it is in the context that will determine its meaning. For example, the word flesh has three different meanings. The meaning it has in John 1:14 is different from the meaning in Galatians 5:16 and is different from the meaning in Galatians 3:3. So you need to be careful that you don't misinterpret a word. Now, what are you supposed to do in the process of lexical syntactical analysis? Let me begin by saying that this exercise could be very frustrating, could be boring, but the results are usually exciting and meaningful. There is a 7-step procedure. 1. Identification of the general literary form. 2. Tracing the development of the author's theme and fitting the passage into the context. 3. Identifying the natural divisions of the text. 4. Identifying the connecting words within paragraphs and sentences. 5. Determining the meaning of individual words. 6. Doing syntactical analysis. And 7. writing the results of the analysis in a lay manner. Now let's begin with the first one, identifying the general literary form. Now, the literary form an author decides to use in conveying his message goes a long way to influence the way his or her work will be interpreted. If an author is using poetry, then definitely we cannot interpret his work literally because he has what we call the poetic license. We cannot interpret as if he's using prose. Now, in the New Testament, the generally acceptable literary forms are prose, poetry, and apocalyptic literature. Revelation is the only apocalyptic writing in the New Testament, and it often contains symbolically used words. In prose and poetry, words can also be used literally and figuratively, but figurative languages are more predominant in poetry, while literary language dominates the prose style. Now, how do you trace the development of an author's theme? Actually, the development of the author's theme is a continuation of contextual analysis, and this step is important for two reasons. First, the context remains the best source for determining the meaning of the word as intended by the author. Second, a word taken out of context can be overwhelmed by the technicalities of linguistic analysis that you will lose sight of the primarily intended. The next step is to identify the natural divisions of the text. Now, if we look into our Bible today, it's divided into chapters and verses, and you have to note that that was not how the Bible was originally. The chapters and the verses we know today were invented in the early 13th century by Archbishop Stephen Langton. He invented this so that it would be easy to make references and people will be able to locate passages. And we have to admit that though the purpose was good, it came out with a very big disadvantage. Sometimes the thought of the author are divided unnaturally. Let's just look at an example in Revelation 12, the last verse, and also 13, the first verse. In two versions of the Bible, Revised Standard Version and the King James Version, you will be stunning to see what the result will look like. Now, the next thing you need to do is to identify connecting words within paragraphs and sentences. And these are words that are used to connect ideas. These include the conjunctions, the prepositions, and relative pronouns. When you come across such words, you need to ask certain questions as to get a clue as to what is being discussed. When a pronoun is used, you need to ask where or what is the antecedent of the pronoun. When words like therefore comes up, you should know that this is connecting a theoretical agreement and possibly with a practical application. We can take a good example in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 13. Now, determining the meaning of individual words. Word analysis is important because words may have acquired many denotations. These are specific meanings, and connotations. These are additional implications, as well as popular denotations. Now, we need to know the following. Pursue the meaning intended by the author for his original readers. Words may have a wide range of meanings, and their meaning can change depending on the time, the situation, and the person using the word. Finally, always remember that words operate in a context and receive their meaning from the context. You can also do the following to determine a word's meaning. Study how the word is used in other ancient literature, the Septuagint, and other biblical books written by the same or other authors. Study the synonyms of the word and compare them. Study the etymology of the word. However, when you are dwelling in the realm of etymology, you must be very careful because most of the time, etymologies can be conjectural, and also the radical changing nature of words across time makes such studies very difficult.
It's 2 hours.
You will need the use of concordances, lexicons, and theological word books to succeed in this enterprise. I will want us together to take a pause now and let us look at the meaning of the word eketo as used in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 2. Now, you also need to look at the subject and predicate relationship. There are times when the subject and the predicate within a sentence explain one another. And if this is done, then you don't look for another meaning for the word. Again, you might also look and see if there is the presence of parallelism. Parallelism is very high in poetic languages. Parallelism is one of the great features of Hebrew poetry and actually Hebrew language. And parallelism is the deliberate repetition of words or sentence structure for effect. There are 3 forms of parallelism that are prevalent. The synonymous parallelism, where the second line repeats the idea in the first line. An example is Proverbs 6:16. Antithetical parallelism, when the second line is a contrast of the first line. A good example is Proverbs 10:7. And synthetic parallelism, when the second line concludes the idea of the first line, as in Proverbs chapter 10 verse 26. You must also watch out for the possibility of figures of speech. Figures of speech are words or group of words used to give particular emphasis to an idea. The special emphasis is typically accomplished by a user's conscious deviation from the strict literal sense of a word or from the more commonly used form of word order or sentence construction. Let's briefly look at Song of Solomon chapter 8 verse 8 to 10. To understand the intention of an author, you need to gather additional information about the word or phrase as they are used in clearer passages. Now, Brickler identified 2 types of parallel: the verbal parallel, which is the use of similar words which could have different meanings, and the real parallel, which is the use of different words with the same. Now, I want you to take this activity. As you are listening to this video, you can take a pause and look at the use of the word flesh in Pauline epistles only. Now, syntactical analysis deals with the expression of thought through grammatical forms and relationships within the words used. I am one of those who say that biblical scholars must have a very good knowledge of the English language and an working knowledge of Hebrew and Greek. Greek language is synthetic, and unlike English, it does not depend on word order for meaning. It depends on word endings or case endings. And this is very important for you. As your activity for this unit, I will want you to attempt a syntactical analysis of Luke chapter 10, verse 34. Combine your study of English passage with Greek passage. As we draw the line for this session, I will say, I wish you well. Enjoy your course.